Assalamu alaikum. I am Ahmed Ramadan. Welcome to Muslim Network TV's special segment. Today we will be interviewing a very special guest. Haroon Siddiqui is a Canadian Muslim journalist, author, and commentator with over 40 years of experience in the media. He is the Editorial Page Editor Emeritus of the Toronto Star. His work has appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, and the Globe and Mail, and he is a prominent voice on issues of social justice, identity, and religious tolerance. Thank you so much for joining us. My Name Is Not Harry is being described not just as a memoir, but as a movement. What does this book mean to you, and why was now the right time to share your story?
It's a long story, but I had really originally started writing this book under the rubric of how Canada has changed for the better in the 50 or 60 years that I've been in Canada. But then somebody said you should write about your origins in India as well. And I said, that's a separate book. And then she said, no, make it part of this book because in Canada, we are an immigrant nation and we bring complicated histories to Canada. And that's what enriches the national quilt of Canada, multicultural Canada. And then I started writing it and wrote about my origins in India, the independence movement against the British, my family being involved in it. And as it was evolving, it fell into the narrative that I have handled throughout my career, which is the importance of importance of individuals, peoples of minorities keeping their identities, their faith, their name intact, which is why my name is not Harry, which is a declarative statement. No, I am Haroon, I am Muhammad, I am so-and-so. And people should be proud of their names. They should insist on other people stretching their muscles to pronounce their names properly. And they should be proud of who they are. They're proud of their faith, proud of their ethnicity, proud of their religion, proud of their language, proud of their culture. I'm from India. I'm very proud of having brought the DNA of a 3,000-year-old civilization. I'm proud Muslim. 1,500 years of history flows through me individually as it does through all Muslims. So this is really an assertion that the minorities like Muslims who have come to the West, they ought not to be put on the defensive. We are told always, do in Rome as Romans do. No, I will do what the law allows me to do, and the law allows me to be whoever I want to be, so long as I obey the law. So we don't have to feel pressured to changing our names or mispronouncing our names or being defensive about our faith. I mean, that is really the central narrative of this book.
Absolutely. And I'm very glad actually that suggestion was made and you did take it from, the origins in India to Canada here, because I think a lot of communities and a lot of people relate to that, being, like you said, an immigrant nation and a lot of immigrants in this country. So the one book, one ummah and Muslim Pride campaign aims to rally community around this book. What does this campaign mean to you, and how can people contribute to making it a success?
No, besides reading the book, I mean, I don't personally profit from it. Whatever money I will make or have made, I am contributing it to other causes and so on. It is really this idea that being Muslim is not a negative quality, because a lot of Muslims have been put on the defensive since 9/11. And what you recall what happened after 9/11, people began saying, I'm a Muslim, but I'm not a Osama bin Laden Muslim. I'm a Muslim, but I'm not a fundamentalist Muslim. I'm a Sufi Muslim. Without ever knowing what Sufi means, except to mean that I'm Muslim light. I'm not a terrorist. Don't treat me as bad. No, I mean, one should be assertive and proud of who we are, and this is the punchline of this whole story is the following. In spite of all the Islamophobia that has gone on for the last 25 years or so, or because of it, Muslims have become more Muslim. Muslims are proud of being Muslims. I mean, look at the hijabi women, hijabi, especially the young girls and so on. They are wearing their hijab with pride as a marker of identity. They are in the front lines of fighting two kinds of discrimination: gender discrimination as well as religious discrimination. In my books, they are the real heroes of post 9/11 among Muslims, because they have challenged the stereotypes that others have tried to impose on them. And despite all the odds, they have remained firm and they have been confident, and they wear their identity on their heads. More power to them. That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is the more Islamophobes and the majority community has tried to put down Muslims, Muslims have become stronger. I mean, this is a month of Ramadan. Look at the mosques. Mosques are overflowing with the crowds for Taraweeh. Every nook and cranny of just about every mosque I have visited is full. People are spilling over into gyms and so. You go to Jummah, 3 Jummahs, 4 Jummahs in different masajids. Something more important has happened actually, which is not really properly understood or thought of. Muslims are shedding more and more of their ethnicity and religion and language and so on. They're becoming a true Ummah. So we are not Indian Muslims or Pakistani Muslims or Gujarati Muslims, even though there are pockets of that and there are different masajids based on those kinds of sentiments. Muslims have become universal Muslims in the true concept of Islam. Yet one more thing has happened. We don't realize it. Just think back 20, 25 years, people, wherever you went, you said, only if Saudi Arabia helped us. Only if the Islamic conference would come to our aid. I no longer hear that much more. People are becoming self-reliant. They are building their own institutions in North America, in England, in Europe to a lesser extent, which means that they have empowered themselves or empowering themselves in a democratic society. And traditionally, Muslims have divided the world into Darul Islam and Darul Harb. Darul Islam being Darul Islam and Darul Harb being where the religion of Islam is not allowed to practice. More and more people are realizing we are living in a Darul Amn, land of peace in Canada, in Great Britain, and even in the United States and Donald Trump's America. Whatever our challenges have been, whatever our difficulties have been, they are far less compared to the plight of Muslims in Gaza and elsewhere and so on. We are blessed to live where we live, and whatever challenges we have, they are minuscule compared to the plight of many Muslims around the world, including in many Muslim nations. So in this sense, alhamdulillah, we should be grateful for what we have and continue to prosper as we have so far. That's the general central message of this book.
Yeah, no, you know what? Especially, definitely agree with your point on our Muslim sisters and them being on the front lines. And a big shout out to them because they do, unfortunately, bear a large brunt of the backlash or the aggression sometimes. So
yes.
Also, I definitely agree with you that there was this sentiment early on where we would turn towards, Middle East countries and South Asia and, our back home where people would say, quote unquote, back home. But now you see a lot more activity when it comes to politics, whether it's Muslims running in for office or being involved in, the political process, advocating and so on. So I've, even me in my lifetime, I've definitely seen that change, and Muslims becoming a lot more rooted in this country and self-reliant and depending on their ability here. And it also gives us, like you said, we are blessed, but that also has a lot of responsibility that comes with it. And I hope that we continue to live up to those responsibilities.
Yeah, you see, if you remember in the 2021 national census in Canada, Canada is, by the way, one of the few countries in the world that specifically asks the religion question. In the United States, they don't ask the religion question. In France, it is banned. in this falsified idea of laïcité or secularism. In Canada, every 10 years, Statistics Canada, which does our national survey, asks this question: what is your faith? What is your religion? And 2021, it showed there are 1.8 million Muslims. Now there may be about 2 million. More importantly, they also follow up with a question: how do you define yourself as your identity? And in the 2021 survey, it showed something very remarkable. It said roughly about 75 or 80%, roughly in that region, Muslims identified themselves as Muslim and as Canadian. They did not say, I'm an Indian Muslim. They did not say, I'm a Gujarati Muslim or a South African Muslim. Therefore, the twin identities that have emerged are Muslim and Canadian. And the same thing is happening in the United States: Muslim and American, Muslim and Britain. And people are beginning to participate in the democratic process, which really is a very positive development. And they have strengthened their institutions, which speak for them, which raise their voice, and engage them in the political process of the society that they live in, which is a very Islamic thing to do, because where you live, you must work for the general improvement of the society that you are in. Reach out to all fellow human beings, reach out to your neighbors, regardless of what faith they are. And that is what is beginning to happen now, which is an extraordinary development, rarely talked about, but more and more people are beginning to realize we belong here. We are not going back anywhere, or as our parents may have thought, and we are becoming an integral part of the societies in which we live. Therefore, entitled to equal rights. Therefore, also obligated to improve the lot of all of those fellow citizens who may be suffering from discrimination, as we did at one point and still do to some extent. So this is a integration into our societies in a democratic and an Islamic way that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. So this is a very positive development, alhamdulillah.
For sure. I think part of that equation is also your groundbreaking work and being the first Muslim to hold a senior position in the West, actually, in media. And looking back at that, and we were just speaking about identity. How did that shape your approach, your identity, when it came to journalism and public discourse?
No, you see, there are two answers to that. Until 9/11, I was a Canadian journalist who happened to be Muslim. After 9/11, they made me a Muslim journalist. I was responsible for 9/11. I was responsible for Osama bin Laden. Whatever something happens, horrible, what do you, Siddiqui, have to say about this? Nothing, any more than any other concerned citizen. So there's a bifurcation that took place after 9/11, which then led to a great rise in Islamophobia and so on. But that did not really affect me much, honestly, because as a journalist, you develop a thick skin. You're protected by the employer that you work for. In my case, luckily, the Toronto Star, which is a very small and liberal and great newspaper. But the ghettoization of me as only a Muslim journalist was a perfect indicator of where the society was going and had gone wrong at that time, wanting to lay collective guilt on Muslims. That's what we had done during the Second World War on Japanese Canadians, for example. Japanese Canadians were interned during the Second World War. Mm-hmm. Muslims have not been interned since 9/11, but psychologically they have been made to feel interned and bear the scars and burden of it, and that is shown. But what is that great saying? What doesn't kill you makes you strong or stronger, and that is what has happened, which is what I've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, your book is unapologetically Muslim-centered, and if you were to give a message to our listeners and our viewers, why is it critical for Muslims to tell their own stories rather than allow others to define their stories for them?
No, you see that let me just take a minor issue with the way you have framed it, because it implies somehow that they are the culprits. They're not the culprits. What is happening is that the traditional media, it's a long story. Most of the Western media were Western-centric, which meant that they were white-centric. So as our societies changed, the media began to learn, and some of us made some efforts, a lot of efforts at it, to be more inclusive. More inclusive usually translates it to mean, let's put a hijabi woman in front of a camera, or put a bearded Muslim man in front of a camera, who then mispronounces their own names and so on. That's a different story, because they've been put so much on the defensive. No, the bigger issue always has been, what we want is a diversity of viewpoints. There is not just one viewpoint. One viewpoint generally in the Western world has been the Washington's point of view. And most of our, unfortunately, Canadian and also British media have been very America-centric. So whatever the Pentagon says, whatever the White House says, becomes the narrative of the world, especially the Muslim world. And if the Americans have been at war with Islam and with Muslims, as has been the case since 9/11, the war on terror, the wretched war on terror, which led to a war on two nations, Afghanistan and Iraq, neither of whom had anything to do with 9/11. And they spent $8 trillion in two unsuccessful wars, destroyed two countries, destroyed two people, destroyed two great civilizations. And that narrative had to be supported by great propaganda. Islam is the enemy, Muslims are the enemy, terrorisms are everywhere, there's a terrorist under every minaret, on and on it went. So that overwhelmingly negative portrayal of Muslims en masse is not the fault of Muslims. It's the way the system worked. And the pushback has come, but it has come slowly.
Okay, so you've spoken about the importance of being unapologetically Muslim. What advice would you give Muslims in the West who feel pressured to dilute their identity to fit in?
Don't. That's a simple answer.
Very good and very straightforward, and definitely I agree with you.
And the second part, sorry, there's one more left hanging from your previous question was, our parents generally tell their kids, you should be a journalist. You should tell our own stories. Don't be a journalist. There are no jobs in journalism. Get a day job and do something else. You want to do the writing, do it on the side, do it on social media. But the journalism model, as we have known, has broken down. There are no jobs to be had, no career to be had. Unless your dad is going to be writing checks for a long time, don't enter journalism. Do something else and then work on the side. What do you do on the side? You can be on the social media, but social media is just such a snake pit at this time, and so full of poison, one doesn't even know where to start. But a more productive way of doing it would be to be involved in politics, to be involved in the affairs of the nation, not just at federal level, not just at provincial level, but also at the city hall level, at the school board level. Be engaged citizens. That's what I mean. There you can have more effect, and vote, and certainly go out and vote, because there is nothing like the power of voting for politicians to come. Why do you think politicians have been sniffing around mosques for the last 10, 15 years? Because they can see bodies, they can see votes. So exercise that power. I'm not saying vote for this person or that person, but be seen, be heard. And you know what has happened? I mean, in the 2015 election in Canada, which Justin Trudeau won, the national turnout was about 71% in that election. The Muslim turnout was 87%, according to a survey. And in 9 Toronto area ridings, they were the difference in victory and defeat. And since then, their participation has remained fairly high. So regardless of who you want to vote for, must participate, must contest, and make your viewpoints known. It is not easy, as we have seen on the issue of Gaza, that the establishment has taken one voice. The streets have spoken a different language. It has not made much difference. But it has made a difference. It has made a difference in the point of view of public opinion. And that is what one has to do in a democratic process. Democracy moves slowly, but the needle does move. It moves in the end. So you have to be at it all the time. Who was that? Martin Luther King, who said, the battle against equality never ends. You have to be at it all the time.
There's so many different questions I want to ask, but obviously always time is against us. But one thing I wanted to ask about is many of the endorsements of your book emphasized its intellectual honesty, with Nathalie Rosier even calling it a call to intellectual honesty. Do you think there's reluctance, either within the Muslim community or broader society, to have these difficult but necessary conversations?
It's always difficult for any society to have difficult conversations. Some societies more so than others. What we can do is enable. We should be striving for a society that enables more and more such conversations. That's what we ought to be doing, which is not possible now in the United States. I mean, the way it is so deeply divided, 50 to 50%, one half does not listen to the other. Not only tunes the others out, but abuses the other people. The civility is breaking down. It's as though the American civilization is in its last throes and it's breaking down. In Canada, to a lesser extent in Great Britain, sense of civility and order, red lines still matter. And I think we ought to play our part in keeping Canada Canadian as much as possible, and assert our identities within the common good of Canada. That is the real contribution that we as citizens can make and should make.
Okay, so just in an effort of time and to get to our last few points.
Yes.
So as someone who has been at the center of both journalism and free speech advocacy, especially the relevance of that to our time today, what do you see the biggest battle for narrative control is?
Biggest battle for control is really for money, because the big high-tech American giants, Facebook, Meta, so on and so forth, have really, initially, if you remember when the internet came and so on, they said, we have democratized the place. Yes, it did to some extent, because Arab Spring 2011, for example, was brought about partially by social media. It helps people to organize. Facebook helps you organize local neighborhood groups and so on. It has done a lot of good, but overall, it has done spread far more poison than anything else. Why? Because the way the algorithms of the social media work, they prioritize emotion. They prioritize anger. They prioritize murder, mayhem, nudity, all of those things that really run counter to both Canadian values, democratic values, and Islamic values. It has been the same people who are saying that no, we cannot censor anything because we have free speech, are the same people now who have lined up with Trump and are willing to do his bidding and not allow the other points of view to come across. So it's the big money that is talking at this point, especially in the United States, which is why in Canada it's rarely talked about. The government of Canada has been trying for the last 4 or 5 years to bring in legislation to put some controls, and the free speech advocates have been opposing it. Libertarians have been opposing it, and most of the citizenship has been disconnected from the issue. It is very important. European Union has done far better than we have. It is very important to know a great Canadian principle. There is free speech, but there is also guardrails against hate speech. My freedom to swing my arms stops at your cheek. So there are checks and balances. Free speech is not absolute. Free speech does not mean that you malign people, that you sow division in society, that you prompt murders and mayhem, as has happened in Burma, has happened elsewhere, for example. So this idea that free speech is totally free is false. It's a bit of an American idea. In Canada, the Supreme Court of Canada has held at least three rulings that efforts by the state to curb absolute free speech is absolutely legitimate, because it's in the interest of society not to allow hate to spread and us to malign fellow citizens and sow seeds of division in society.
Thank you so much for joining us, Haroon Siddiqui. It's been a pleasure, and we hope to have you back soon to speak more about these important issues that we've been discussing.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be with you, and thank you for doing this. Assalamu alaikum.